Learn about the Gallivan's Ferry stump from someone with more than 5 decades in this amazing historical event. Coming up next on Carolina People. Good morning. Welcome to Carolina People. This morning we're at the Fox 43 studio. We're back with part 2 of John Jenrette. Good morning, John.
Well, listen, what a beautiful day we're having. A great morning. Thank you for allowing me to be back.
Absolutely. It's such a treat. And, of course, for yourself, having grown up in Horry County, left to head to Wofford, then overseas, and then to Columbia, and then back to practice in Ocean Drive there, and later heading back to Columbia as a state legislator, and then Washington. You pretty well hit the gamut there, John.
Been a wonderful experience. Growing up in Horry County has been a magnificent experience, and particularly being able to watch what has happened, and particularly where we're living now in the Myrtle Beach area, and seeing as I've been able to watch the Loris and the other areas that now are picking up, and you know, they don't mind saying it. They're being picked up because of the growth in our Grand Strand area, and it's good for all of us. It's going to be good, and it's been wonderful watching it, and I'm just so proud of our legislative leaders today who have taken the ball and moved us forward as they have. It's a great experience living in Myrtle Beach and in the Grand Strand in Horry County. What a great place.
Absolutely, John. One of the great things about having you in this week was the excitement of knowing that you not only grew up here, but you spent a long time representing areas other than just Myrtle Beach. Knowing the PD well and running in 72 originally, losing in the election to Ed Young there, and then coming back in 74, 76, 78. Representing that 6th district, share with the viewers a little bit about after you were first elected or beforehand. Did you tour the terrain a lot? Did you spend a lot of time going through Marlboro and Chesterfield and Lee counties?
Well, I certainly, when I was making my final decision, you had to do that. You did that because you would try to get people to set up luncheons for you or gatherings. You would go. So one of the reasons you would try to have what is called a body person who's going to be driving you, so you time it, you do, and you know from the political leaders from that area where Frank lives and where Joe lives and where Miss Jones lives on the road. So if they're important, you will know where to stop. You'll know where the meetings are. So it's part of your strategic planning if you're seeking to run for office, because you have to know the terrain. You have to know the issues that are facing that. And as the 6th district that I was so fortunate to serve was the largest land area east of the Mississippi at the time.
Wow!
And I lived right at the Atlantic Ocean and the North Carolina line, so sometimes it would take me 3 hours to get to Manning or to Somerton or somewhere in that area, or to Lee County. But having the opportunity to going into those counties and meeting the legislative leaders, the religious leaders, the city leaders, getting their ideas, and then particularly going to that's a big farm area. You had to go and meet with the farm leaders, and as farm commodities are one of the most important factors for that 6th district in Congress, you have to be prepared and you have to know. And I remember when tobacco first began getting hit on by the health people, and I was there, and I was trading votes from California and in New York to try to keep tobacco going and keep the subsidy going. And I brought in a group of consultants, and we started a new crop that was going to take care of tobacco, and it was sunflowers. For a few years, we had the prettiest crops in the state, or maybe in the United States, but many things happened, and sunflowers never caught on. But it was a learning experience, and I watched farmers who would take the first year or two, they would take just a small plunge in it, and they would do well, and then it got big, and we just had such a disaster with palm oil coming in from Asia at that time. And palm oil, as labor is cheap now in other countries, we had gathering palm oil at the same time we were having to gather oil from sunflowers, and it just the economics of it. But watching the industrial part in Georgetown, which I had not been around before, watching the steel mill, and I remember it being built, and I wondered, is this the right thing to do in the center of a town, a beautiful historic town? But the die had been cast. It was there, and I certainly can't say anything about it. I became great friends with Wolfgang, the owner, and even dedicated it. He built a steel plant in Paris, and I dedicated the steel plant in Paris. But from the steel plant to the port authority in Georgetown that I had not been with, over to the lakes in Manning, the Santee Cooper Lakes in Manning County, then to Marion and its population, its unemployment problems in Marlboro. It was a great experience going around, but it was very tiring. It was one that one seeking office should really spend a few days traveling around and say, can I do this? Do I have the time? Do I have what it takes to, the burning in the belly is what we call it, to get up at 5 o'clock and 4 o'clock in the morning and get to those breakfasts at the Rotary Club and all. And if you want to do it, you can. If you listen to those people while you're there, you'll be a better person and certainly a better candidate. But you've got to get around. Television, radio makes it easier, but there are very few candidates that can be elected without having been around, so that John can say, well, I met him, or Frank can say, or Miss Jones can say, he was here. He cares enough about my church. He cares enough about the synagogue. He cares enough about my club. And my interest, and he worries about the charity, how much money we are not bringing in that we should, things that would really get the interest of the people. And if you don't have that, what are you there for?
Right.
So if you don't have their interest, everybody that goes to Washington would like to be a United States senator, president or vice president or senator, no question about that. But when you get there as a member of that body, 535 prima donnas in the House and Senate, each one with their own idea, trying to bring those together and making sure that in my instance, was the 6th District, was cut a piece of that pie properly, that they are getting their fair share. You don't know that unless you've done your homework and you've met with those people back in the district and know what they need. And then you set up your priorities, and in Congress you walk around with a little 3x5 card telling you what to do.
Oh, wow.
But that's your staff putting it together. But, what they do, it keeps you on schedule.
Right.
It gives you notes that you need to have for your committees and all. But those notes are prepared from what the congressman or the staff brings back from seeing those people. And if you don't know that terrain, you will not be a good representative, no matter what position one seeks.
John, we think about that terrain. Of course, you hear about issues. You mentioned gerrymandering earlier, or yesterday, or when you were with us earlier. That aspect of serving a giant geographical area, and of course, you bring in that having lived right there at the state line, right on 45 feet from the Atlantic Ocean, but also representing folks in Manning and in Marlboro County. It sounds like it doesn't have to be that tight geographical aspect to be able to represent other views. We think about the current 6th District, which stretches into Charleston, stretches into Columbia, stretches into the PD. Oftentimes folks would think there is not a commonality of interest, not a commonality of...
Well, as a Constitution, you're gerrymandered every 10 years, and you represent the exact same number of people that someone in Oregon does, or Washington State. So it's not, you don't always have the opportunity to pick exactly who you represent. So you have to be prepared to understand and study and be able to promote those issues that they have an interest in, because I thought, as being a member of Congress, that I was no more than an arm of that 550,000 people I represented, that I should do everything I could to make sure that the other 434 members of the House of Representatives knew what I felt that the district that I was fortunate enough to represent, certainly wasn't my district, but one that I was fortunate enough to represent, needed, and what their concerns were. And again, going around to the terrain, getting to know the people, and listening.
Right.
You told me about somebody that said a great statement. I'm going to use it. You got 2 ears and only one mouth. Right. It means you should listen at least twice as much, I think, exactly. And that's great for a politician. Because sometimes, we think because we've had staff to do a lot of research and study that we might know more than Farmer John. But you know, Farmer John's been out there doing that for 30 years or whatever. And if you don't listen to the experience, you will not be able to promote your compromise that you must be able to promote when you are getting ready to vote, which is the important part of it.
I'm just sitting here thinking of this, John. I hadn't even contemplated that. Horry County, born and bred, and you were representing as many as 500,000 folks. At one time, there hadn't been an example of that in Horry County history. I mean, that was a big deal.
Well, I was fortunate to have been there, and I was fortunate to be the only native-born person from Horry County to serve in the United States Congress. And is that big or not big? 12,000 people have been served in the Congress since the history of our country. I think it was big. I was honored very much.
And the areas continue to be honored by that aspect. And is there a chance that an Horry County person could be elected again, either I mean, you know, we talked the other day about the first district now, which encompasses much of Horry County, if not the whole county.
The whole county, yeah.
Is got a big Charleston is the predominant aspect there. How could someone out of this area be elected to Congress?
Boy, it's extremely difficult, and the people in Horry County know that to begin with. We fought over my early years when I was in the state legislature before I ran for Congress, Florence. The gentleman that, other than Ed Young for his one term that I defeated, was a Democrat who had gone to Congress the year I was born from Florence. And his interest in Horry County was the fish fries just before election and the 3 or 4 people. And I don't fault him for seeing the 3 or 4 people because I know them and they're great families in Myrtle Beach. Right. But we did not have, nor would we ever, as if we've got another city that's prominently in population like Florence. And when I came in, no one said, well, you can't beat anyone in Florence. Particularly a congressman who was chairman of a committee and had been there for 34 years. Right. And a little-known history, I'd been his campaign manager for a couple of years, and I'd always told him I wanted to run, and he always said one more term. Oh, wow. So I made, after 2 or 3 times of that, I just told him that I was going to run, and I'd welcome him on the stump, and I hope he welcomed me, and we had a hard-fought battle. I'm telling you, it was, and I guess one of the things that when I defeated Mr. McMillan, who had been in so long and all, one of the first calls I got that evening was from George McGovern, who was running for president. I didn't need George McGovern speaking to me in Myrtle Beach or in Florence, South Carolina, but that was the first person, and all the press was standing around. I thought it was the president or somebody. I knew it couldn't be Nixon, but I didn't know who it was. It was George McGovern. So my first telephone conversation with Washington from Florence with the press there was speaking to George McGovern, who was not liked very much in South Carolina or Horry County and Florence particularly, but that was an interesting part of that race. But winning is going to be extremely difficult for someone from Horry County for a while. I don't know that we can't do that, and a candidate can come along, and unfortunately money now is much more than the equalizer. It is absolutely essential part of it. Unfortunately, the Constitution didn't want that to happen. Anyone in politics basically doesn't want that to happen, and it's sort of like the Republicans, when they took over Congress in '94, talked about they were going to only serve 3 terms, and having been able to serve 3 terms, I know how interesting it is to be able to stay 4, 5, and 6 terms, so I'm thankful that we never had a constitutional amendment limiting the terms. I'd rather the people limit the terms of the member of Congress than a constitutional amendment. Interesting.
John, I'd love to talk to you about that '94 takeover and Lee Atwater's influence in that and how it impacted the rest of the country. But you gave a good segue into what I mentioned that you had told John McMillan you look forward to seeing him at the stump, and that's part of the reason you're here today. Let's talk about the Galvin's Ferry stump. You know, Russell was with us recently. We'll have more folks in the near future. The excitement of the stump is something you've been a part of for a long, long time.
It is a wonderful lesson in history. When I grew up in Loris, I was interested in politics a little bit, but knew not a lot about it. But I had a newspaper route, and I cleaned a couple of department stores at night. I'd sweep out the department stores. And when I got my driver's license, the department store owner said, well, I want to go, somebody to drive me to Galveston Ferry. So that was from 14 when I got my license till I went off to college. Every time there was something at Galveston Ferry, I would drive a group of older men. Now, I don't know what they were doing in the back and all, but I guess they were studying politics. But anyway, I drove them to the Galveston Ferry stump. So it was sort of my bar mitzvah almost, and I certainly don't mean to say that. I hope I don't please no one take that in the wrong way. It was my introduction to manhood, my coming out and politics, which has been such a part of my life. That was what it is. And please, I certainly shouldn't have used that. I respect those ceremonies greatly, but it was a coming out for me. And good land, I don't know that I've missed one. That's 50 years ago. I don't know that I've missed one of those meetings since then. I've seen, Maurice Bessinger, who is now being criticized about his Confederate flag and whether you like that or not. I'll never forget Maurice Bessinger was running for governor and came to Galveston Ferry and rode in on a white stallion with a white suit.
No.
And carried on. And when Phil later ran for governor years later, he had a pair, 5 or 6 people jumping out of parachutes and jumping out of airplanes. It has been one of the greatest displays of individuals doing their thing, thinking that it's politically oriented, and it has brought about a learning, an experience, as well as a learning lesson for anyone that has any interest in politics. Mm-hmm. We all wanted to bring our radio stations there early on after they became more prevalent. Then we wanted to bring the TV stations on after they came. But what we've really done in that is we've taken away a lot of the real feel, smell, and touch of what Galveston Ferry had been. It's good now, but a guy can stay home and watch it and not go out. But the feeling and the spirit that has been brought about for all of those years, and the Holiday family has done so well. And I'm asked. I was asked when the Republican Party became so prevalent in the area. Has anyone asked the Holidays about asking the Republicans to come? And I said, well, I'm not in those decision-making positions, but I understand that it was presented to the Holidays, and they thought about it for a minute or two, and decided that that it was a Democratic function. And even though the Democrats would get up and argue back and forth, they were basically within what we consider the basic Democratic principles. So it should only be Democrats. But just think about if it had been during the modern political party times, the Holidays always invite the presidents and other people down. And listen, they've invited Franklin Delano Roosevelt. They've invited Harry Truman. They've invited John F. Kennedy, Lyndon Baines Johnson, Jimmy Carter, and Bill Clinton. If we'd have had the Republicans, we would have invited Herbert Hoover, Dwight Eisenhower, Richard Nixon, Gerald Ford, the Reagans, and the 2 Bushes. So certainly we're going to want to keep it Democrat. Look, if you look at those 2 rosters of presidents and think about who has a legacy, it's the Democrat presidents, and I'm just happy the Holidays made that decision. We aren't in the majority. The Democrats are not in the majority party here now, so anything that happens in the state, they can look the other way because it's not the Democrats. It's the same in Washington, but it will change. I was just looking at my Capitol. I'm a member of the Capitol Hill Society, and we got a magazine, and it had hinted a little bit about changing of the parties, and had 7 African American members of Congress back in the 41st and 42nd Congress. Right. 3 from South Carolina.
That's amazing.
All 3 Republicans. 3 African American Republicans on the front page of the Capitol Historical Society this month, and they were all Republicans, and that's changed, and it will change back because the philosophies of the parties talked about, that the Democrats for big government and all, but I think really our responsibility is not to add more to those who have much, but to see that those who do not have enough get a little share. And I think that's a philosophy that the holidays went under, that we giving everybody a shot. And so I'm glad it's still there, but more important than who's speaking or what, the fact that it's a part of history. And I see the professor from Francis Marion, a political science professor,
right,
every year, and
Neil
I see,
Thigpen, sure.
Yeah, but I don't see their students.
Right.
And I speak at those colleges, and I ask them, I said, come to that meeting. It's a part of history. It gives you, you can make a mistake and cut it out of a TV program or a radio program, but it's hard to cut it out when you're standing up there speaking and you've got a few hundred people out there.
Right.
So you really get a feel for it, and from Wade Hampton all the way through to the people that have been there, the beauties that they bring, the churches serve food and all, but the fact that it is that eye-to-eye touching contact with the people that are going to be making decisions that affect your life, you need to be there.
You're exactly right. We think back to Strom Thurmond in 48 before he switched parties. Fritz Hollings obviously will be celebrated again.
Yes.
And has been celebrated. The excitement of so many folks. We got about 5 minutes, John. Think about your of course, going there as a 14-year-old as a driver, but then later, when you made that commitment. And one of the great things, I don't know if you pointed it out, Republicans are asked to come. They're thoroughly invited. Man. They're not asked to speak, but they're asked to be in the crowd.
They're going to vote. Hopefully they're going to hear something that some Democrat says that makes them think.
Yeah.
And maybe there'll be a vote. But yes, they are welcome, and it's a part of. They should not be embarrassed about any of their children going to a Democratic stump speaking that carries so much history.
Right.
It's a history lesson as well as it is a political lesson, and sometimes the people have been there, it's been a humor lesson rather than a political lesson as well.
Oh, very definitely. Very definitely. Can you remember the first time you spoke at the stump, the first time you stumped, the first time you went at it?
I do very well, and I was scared to death. It was something I'd seen so many times. I'd heard so many mistakes. I'd heard so many great orators.
Oh, yeah.
And here I was, standing there, scared to death. I don't have any idea how I did, but I've had the pleasure to speak there a number of times. And a few times I thought I did pretty well because it led on the news the next day. But just being there, it gives me, and now, I mean, just like the national anthem sung, I get goosebumps. But when I go there and I see that person, particularly that person speaking there the first time, I know how they felt. I empathize with them. And because a lot of people are talking in the background and everything, and you just got to learn to do that. And you got to speak on. And if you get a little better, you'll call John. Don't you remember that when he speaks? John's talking, so he says, John, don't you remember when we were together? You try to do something to get their attention to close them down. But anyway, it's a great place. I encourage any listener that you have, they'll take a few minutes and go down there on May the 10th. And they have great food starting at 4:30. They have great bands, and about 6:30 or so, the Democrats will speak. There'll be more Republicans there than Democrats, but it'll be a great time, and it's something that they'll be able to say a long, long time from now, that one of the very last original communications processes, areas of politics, was at Gallups Ferry. Thank you, Holidays, for keeping it going.
Absolutely, John. What are you up to now, John? You've got so many things going on. I think I read in an article you're helping the Bulgarian government. I think you talked about, before we got started this morning, about traveling to China.
Yeah.
And having been over there in '98, I think, before President Clinton arrived. We got a couple of minutes. And
that was a great trip. President Nixon got us back on board. President Clinton went, and it's going to be the bread basket of the world for a long time. It is great. I was fortunate enough to be selected to go. There were 10 former members of Congress, 5 Republicans, 5 Democrats. We went to all the cities that the president went to. It was a magnificent trip, and I love that. From politics, I've become close to the Prime Minister of Bulgaria, and a friend of mine and I have a company there now, and we're helping them privatize their farmland. They've got great property on the Black Sea, thousands of acres, but that's under the portfolio of the Prime Minister of Tourism. I'm going to try to get to him later, but right now I'm trying to help them sell their farmland, and it's a wonderful experience. They're great people, and it gives you a chance to see other cultures. It gives you a chance to hear languages, to taste food. But what it does, it makes us appreciate America more. But it also gives us an opportunity, not necessarily to preach, but to let them know that there's freedom that can be available, that they do not have to live under some of these things that they do now, that women have rights. And I just enjoy carrying that message when I go, because we are very fortunate.
Lastly, John, if you hadn't run for office that first time in the 60s and then later run for Congress and been elected to represent so many folks, what do you think you'd be doing now had you not been a state legislator and then a congressman?
Well, I was a pretty good lawyer with a little bit of time. I enjoy trial practice. I would probably have done that, but I often thought that I would have gone back to school in international diplomacy in some way. I would like to go to George Washington, their international school, or now South Carolina is a great international school. The world is becoming so small. If we aren't prepared, I mean individuals aren't prepared for that, we're going to fall out. And there's some great problems coming up now. Terrorism as bad as it is, and we've just got a new world. But we have got to understand other people, other cultures, other religions, if we're going to maintain the strength that we have in America today. And I believe that no matter who's president, that the strength of America is enough for that. I just hope that the president will be fair and be an even thinker.
Thanks so much for being with us today, John. This has been a treat. Stay tuned to more Carolina People with John Jenrette coming up next. When talking about the Gallivan's Ferry stump, you're talking about a slice of pure Americana. You're talking about democracy in its purest form. If you've been sitting here the last 30 minutes, you'd see those two principles recognized with our guest, John Jenrette. He knew he could make a difference. He made a difference. He continues to make a difference. John, thanks so much for being with us this morning.